Mr. Otway here to talk you through one of the hardest skills that you will have to do in history, which is consider source reliability. As you can see here, there are 6 things that you might look at. You don't have to go through them 1 to 6 and answer the questions literally. These are things that you might think of when you're looking at a source to decide how reliable it is. And just think about it, this happens every day in your life, or it should be if you're on the ball, which I know you all are. When somebody says something to you, you shouldn't just go, right, that's the truth. You've got to think about it. Don't just accept everything at face value. There might be a reason why that person is telling the truth and you trust that source. For example, your best mate. However, if the world's biggest gossiper, or at least the year group's biggest gossiper, comes to tell you something, you'll probably question it. So source reliability is all about thinking how much you would trust or not trust a particular source. And it might well be that somebody is unintentionally not telling you the truth. And we'll have a look at some examples. Right, question 1 here, who made it? Well, this is the first thing to think about, and it's clearly the government. And they have made it for people who they want to join the army. So that would be young, healthy men. What info did they include? Well, if we're looking at how reliable this is as evidence of the First World War, then they've included some sort of shell blast here, which we know happened. They fired shells. There's horses. They took a part of the First World War. There were certainly soldiers on horses. We can probably make out the uniform. Maybe not so much on this, but you would be if you had it in front of you. And it includes words like should. These are important things that you might have picked out. Labelling the source is always a good idea. But what did they omit? Which means what didn't they put in? Well, was the First World War anything like this? It may well have looked like that at some points, but I don't think this is most people's view of what the First World War looked like. For a start, there's no trenches. That would be the first thing I would notice have been omitted from the source. Also, it seems to suggest that lots of the soldiers are on horseback, perhaps because there are only soldiers here on horseback. That really wasn't the case. The majority of soldiers wouldn't have been on horseback. And to help us to understand everything about the source is this, which I'll come to in a moment. When did they make it? I've written be careful, because do not do this. Because this was made at the time, that makes it more reliable. That is wrong. Think about it. If, say for example, God forbid, but you just got into a fight in the playground, if I grabbed hold of you and said, hey, what on earth were you doing? What happened? That person, if it were you, who I've just grabbed hold of just after the fight had happened, the adrenaline running through their veins, the emotion, probably the feeling of fury, maybe the fact that it was so-and-so who started it, all of those things would combine to make it less likely that they're going to tell me 100% exactly what happened. So just because somebody was there at the time might actually make them more emotionally attached and might make it less likely to be reliable, but you've got to take every source on its own merit, certainly if you want to be getting level 7s and 8s. In this case, it was made during the war, and therefore, well, when we combine this one, and I'm going to have to talk about it now, why they made it is to try and get people to join up. It was made during the war to make people join up, or try to get them convinced to join up, and therefore it shows this exciting image of warfare during the First World War. It says you should join up. Brave men, not join our men at the front, our brave men at the front, implying that if you are not at the front, you are therefore not a brave man. So all of these things combined help you to consider just how reliable this source is. I'll let you decide for yourself how reliable you think this source is as evidence of the First World War and the fighting that occurred. We'll look at another. So again, how reliable is this source as evidence of the fighting during the First World War? First of all, it's made by somebody who served as a soldier during the Great War. I'm then going to jump down to here. It was made in 1939. So it's an autobiography as well, that might be quite important. It's done after the event, and I've told you when did they make it, you have to be careful with. But in this case, because it is a soldier writing about his own experiences specifically, at least 21 years after he fought, then memory might come into it a little bit here. But you got to read about this person has worn an undergarment of chainmail. Some particular person called Ernest. Such has been worn in the Middle Ages. And I'm talking here about what info they included. Now, this idea of chainmail, that's probably quite unusual. I don't think there's many soldiers in the First World War who wore chainmail underneath their uniform. It might have been included because it is an autobiography. An autobiography is probably being made to sell, to make money, so it's probably included the most unusual incidents from the First World War in there. He might have over-exaggerated. It seems to the whole story here about Ernest wearing his chainmail because he might feel a little bit more safe in it, and then just as he's making his tea, a shell came over and blew him to pieces. That story maybe might not have happened exactly like it was. Perhaps when you've told the story long after the event, maybe if I asked you to tell me about a residential you went on in Year 6, you might tell me the funniest story happened. Perhaps wasn't the funniest story, but in your memory you've remembered it a little bit different to exactly how it actually happened and slightly exaggerated, intentionally or unintentionally. What did they include though? Well, people definitely got blown to pieces by shells. People back home were definitely worried about the people there, may have sent them presents, certainly did send them some things. We know about the postal system in the First World War. What did they omit though? Well, what about the people who didn't get blown to pieces by a shell? Or where was he when he got hit by a shell? Perhaps it is implying here that everywhere, every soldier was under constant danger of being blown to pieces, which is not entirely the case because not every soldier at every time was in the front line. These, again, all things that you have to consider. It's a lot of mights, so you should be included might. Ooh, terrible handwriting. I'll use blue for this one. Probably. These are all things. You can't say it's definitely reliable. You might say it probably might be exaggerating. And you've got to pick out quotes from the source to support what you're saying.